Hey, peace and blessings to you. My name is Jerry B. I am the entree musician, and so are you. Welcome to this very special Encore edition of the Entree Musician Podcast. You know, with the passing of the legendary Tony Bennett about a week and a half ago, I thought it necessary to revisit the conversation I had with super managers Vance Anderson and Ron Moss. Now, these are two men that I hold in the highest esteem as entree musicians. I've interviewed each one of them before separately, but once I had the opportunity to introduce them to each other, I jumped at the chance, and I worked to schedule this conversation, which originally aired on this podcast back in November of 2021. And so I want you to go back and see those original podcasts, the ones that I did with them separately, and I'll make sure that you will be able to click on them, obviously, if you're watching this on YouTube. And if you're listening on podcasts, we will make sure that we put the links in the show descriptions. Let me just remind you who these two gentlemen are. Vance Anderson is currently managing the folk duo the Well Pennies, and he spent 20 years as road manager for the iconic Tony Bennett. Vance also spent years on the road co-managing Pat Metheny and working with John McLaughlin, Paco deLucia, and Al Di Meola, among many other top-notch acts. Vance is not only a dear friend, but really a mentor to all of us who in the entree musician community. His wisdom and his experience allows each of us to grow and thrive in our endeavors, and we are continually grateful to have him on our team. Vance was kind enough to endorse my book, The Path of the Entree Musician, so I really appreciate him, and he's a great guy. Ron Moss was the executive producer and president of Stretch Records, and Ron was the personal tour and business manager for some of the hottest names in jazz, including Chick Corea, Stan Getz, Gerald Abright, Jeff Lorber, John Patitucci, Eric Marienthal, Dave Weckyl, and most currently for Cal Eastwood. Ron has also managed contemporary artists like Isaac Hayes and Mick Fleetwood. He is the father of the famed actress Elisabeth Moss. And along with Vance, Ron provides personal advice to me. I appreciate that, Ron. Thank you. Which I also share with entree musicians as I get it from him. Entree musicians who are looking for management, which also helps provide insight on what managers are looking for in artists. And I'm grateful to call both of these gentlemen mentors. So let's get into this conversation where you're going to hear wisdom and experience like you've probably never heard it before, not to mention personal stories of two gentlemen who have helped to guide the career of some of the greatest stars in the musical galaxy. Let's go ahead and get into it right now. And peace and blessings to you. My name is Jerry B. I am the entree musician, and so are you, and so are these two heroes who are sitting to the left and bottom of your screen. I will introduce them as such. They are great people in their own right, and boy, have we had a show before we started this show here. On my left is Ron Moss, and Ron, I've interviewed him twice before here on the Entree Musician. He was none other than the caretaker for, and by caretaker I mean manager, record company executive, all of that for Mr. Chick Corea. May he rest in peace. And so Ron shared some incredible stories, and then my friend and fellow entree musician mastermind partner is Vance Anderson, whom you know, we've interviewed Vance before. He's been on the show several times. And Vance's, I don't want to call it his claim to fame, but his role with making sure that everything that was supposed to happen happened excellently with the iconic Mr. Tony Bennett. This is where Vance comes into play, but also he is managing that super duo, the Well Pennies, right now. So we have a lot of stories to share, but this is going to be a very special Entree Musician, because if you are an artist, we're going to tackle two things. Number one, you need to know what to look for or who to look for in a manager, the principles, the values, the characteristics, and then they will also tell you as managers what they are looking for in artists. So along with these wonderful stories and the memories they're going to share, they're going to give you some valuable advice too. So without further ado, Ron and Vance, what's happening, brothers?
Good evening.
Did you say you went with Tony Bennett?
I thought I spent 20 years as Tony Bennett's road.
Man, I love him. Yeah,
he's a good man.
I didn't realize that.
Can you tell the story, Vance, then how you came? Because we talked about this a couple of years back, but can you refresh us on how you came to work for and work with Tony Bennett?
Well, you want me to go all the way down the field of how the Lord worked in my life on that particular thing?
You can roll with it, or you can give us the Cliff Notes version. Is yours?
Yeah, long story short. So I had just finished 2 years touring David Byrne and the Ray Momo band. He had this big Latino band, 18 people on stage, an album, Ray Momo, and we toured it for 2 years with my wife. My wife was tour manager and I was production and sound. And she went back to Brazil, where she's from. I stayed in America at the end of the tour. Our visas ran out. I couldn't leave. She couldn't return. I embarked on a very difficult year of trying to find the next move, next thing. And I had gone for an interview with Danny Bennett in Boston for some band that he was managing.
Now, who's Danny Bennett? Is this Tony's brother?
This is Tony's son.
Tony's son, okay.
Danny Bennett, Tony's son, and has managed Tony for 40 years. A brilliant businessman. And Danny was managing this band out of Boston. I went to where I lived. I went to see him, had a meeting. Nothing came of it. A year later, I got a phone call from Tony Bennett's office in New York to go down and start working immediately. Mm. In the interim, between that year of my wife being in Brazil and me being in America, unable to move, for some reason unable to work, this whole year was very difficult. My mother-in-law called me one day and she said, she was a pastor of a church in Brazil. She called me one day, she said, I was praying today and the Lord told me that you're going to work for Tony Bennett. And I'm like, yeah, right, sure. Yeah, sure. So, and she said, no, you are. And I said, you know, what? There's no job with Tony Bennett, nothing. Every day she would call me and she said, so have you got the job yet? And I would say, what job? And she said, the job with Tony Bennett that God told me you're going to have. And I'm like, no, there is no job. Then one day I got a phone call and I picked up the phone. I said, hello. They said, hello, this is Suzanne from Tony Bennett's office in New York. We want you to come down immediately. I'm like, what? So suffice to say, well, I can't come immediately, but I'll come tomorrow. And then later that day when my mother-in-law called me, she said, so have you got the job yet? And I had to say, well, yes, actually. I have got it. Anyway, wow. So I went down to meet. Tony was in the middle of an engagement at the Blue Note. It was the 10th anniversary of the Blue Note. Mm. It was the Friday I went in. They'd been there since the Wednesday. And I didn't meet them before the show. I only met Tony. I went to introduce myself as the new guy to Tony in the intermission. And I received the best advice that I ever received in the business. Mm. I walked into the dressing room in the intermission and I said, Mr. Bennett, my name's Vance Anderson. I'm the new guy. And he said to me, call me Tony. He said, make it look effortless.
Wow.
Okay. Okay, fine. And that was it. That was his premise to me. Make it look effortless. And that's what we did. And that was the start of 20 years of tour managing him.
Wow.
That's amazing.
That's a good story. I don't have anything like that. I only in contact with Tony Bennett. I used to stay at the Warwick Hotel in New York, and we'd go across to Astro's across the street. And that was apparently one of his favorite restaurants, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah, he'd go to
Is that
true? Is that true?
Yeah, corner of 50.
Yeah, that one, yeah.
He lived in the apartment building above the Astro.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was told.
Yeah.
I never met him there. I'm just saying.
Yeah, no, he did. That's where he
That's
lived.
an amazing story. How did she know? Oh, well, I guess that's the whole thing, isn't it? She spoke to God.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
She was tapped in.
She
Wow.
prayed and God told her. I mean, my mother-in-law was a very unusual woman.
Out of the blue. That's an amazing story. I have nothing like that.
Not many people do, Ron.
But so how did you, Ron, come to work for, meet and work with Mr. Chick Corea?
Chick.
Well, I'd met Chick in England when he was playing at the Ronnie Scott's. I guess it was with the band with Joe Farrell and Flora and Aieto and Stanley Clark. Great band. I went up 3 nights in a row because I just loved the music. And then, so I sort of got to meet him. But Neville Potter, the lyricist, actually was married to Leslie Wynn. Well, I don't know if they were married, but they were together. And he moved to New York, Neville did. And Neville and I were friends for, I don't know, 20 years prior to that. And he was working with Chick. Leslie was kind of the manager, and Neville was the finance guy. And they were working together for quite a while. I moved to America in 74. I flew into LA. And then I had no money. I was broke. I took a trombone and a horrible suit and lived in LA and slept on a garage floor in Alita.
Wow.
Out in the valley. And then I was broke. And I was in Denny's one day with the percussionist from the band, Les Carter. And I thought, let me give Neville a call. So I called him and says, Neville, they're going to send me home soon unless I find a job or something.
Or get a new suit at least.
Yeah, exactly. New suit. This suit was so bad, Vance. It was Burton's. I bought it at Burton's.
Well, I work for Burton's.
Anyway, it shone green one way and red the other. Wow. It was so bad. Anyway,
it was special.
It was a special, yeah. No, yeah, it wasn't really red. It was a dark maroon. Anyway, so I got on the phone with Neville. I had $1 and I got this phone call and I said, Neville, I'm desperate. So he called me back. We were in a Denny's. And he called me back and he says, oh, what a shame. I just gave the tour manager job to a guy called David Weiss or Denny Weiss, I forget, who was Nat Weiss's son. Nat Weiss was a lawyer for the Beatles back in the day. Anyway, he says, we just gave the job away. So I said, oh, crikey. So a week later, I got a call from Neville saying, we just fired Danny because he was doing drugs and Chick doesn't want any drugs around the band, blah, blah, blah. So he said, are you interested? So they flew out to LA and Leslie did. Leslie Wynn Potter, her name was, and she's still alive, and Neville. They flew out to LA. We went to see Rollerball at the Cinerama Dome because she wanted to see it. We went to Musso Frank's and we got on great. And they offered me the job. So then about a week later, I flew to New York with my green red suit, and started being the tour manager. I had 6 weeks to put the tour together, which is not long. You know what I'm talking about. Yeah. And the first date we played was we opened to Blood, Sweat and Tears at the Westchester Theater, Frank Sinatra's Mafia place, whatever. Wow. And the rule was you never took a check, right? Right. In those days, anyway. And the bloody manager, I forget his name, actually. The manager of Blood, Sweat and Tears gave me a check, $5,000 half time. He gave me a check. I'm in trouble now because I got a check, no cash. Yeah. I drive everybody home. We drive from Westchester. We got this big Chevy Impala. We drove the 4 guys and me in the Chevy I take everybody home. I go back to the office on Long Island. And I say, Neville, I got a check. He says, okay, you're going to get up in the morning. You're going to drive into the city. It was a long way. We lived down up in Huntington. And you're going to go to the bank, the Blood, Sweat and Tears Bank, and you're going to cash the check. So that's what I did. And I cashed it. Yeah. And I didn't have, if I hadn't cashed it, I'd have ended up owing the $5,000.
Yeah.
That was my first lesson as a tour manager.
Good lesson, man. Good lesson.
Yeah, it was a good lesson. Yeah.
Yeah, learn that early.
So then I was the tour manager with Chick. So I did that for a couple of years until the band broke up. Chick fired everybody, and the band broke up, and then we moved to Los Angeles, and I became like, you know, the difference. I wasn't a manager. I was the executive director of his organization. I got paid a salary, right? So real managers get a percentage.
I see.
I didn't ever get a percentage.
Mm-hmm.
Then he fired me. He brought in some other guy that he thought was stellar, who ended up ripping him off. And then 2 years later, he came to me and said, look, will you manage me? And I said, yeah, if you give me a percentage, I'll manage you. So he did. And that started it off. That was 1978, 79.
Wow.
Nice.
And there we go. Yeah, I was a manager then. Until he fired me in 2001. The year of 9/11, he fired me again.
Wow.
See, the first guy to go, it's like soccer. The first guy to go is the manager, right?
Yeah.
Now, tell me
Well, it's not gonna
why
be-
that is. Tell me why that is.
I don't know. In the Newcastle, Bruce just got fired, didn't he? The Newcastle manager.
Right.
Yeah, they always fire the manager
They
first.
look for a scapegoat, and it's not, it's not the manager per se. It's just that figurehead.
Yes, that's right.
They just want to find some scapegoat, and and so
Yeah.
Is it like
Well,
sports?
the
Is it
Tony
like
Bennett
sports where they-
organization, we fire the piano players. That's what we.
Yes. Well, when I got fired in 2001, the whole record industry was collapsing. I mean, literally, we weren't selling CDs anymore.
Right.
Instead of selling 200,000 CDs or 300, 400,000, we were selling 50.
Mm.
The industry was just collapsing.
Yeah.
CD sales were going out the bottom. It was a bad time. So they fired the manager.
I remember this little story that Tony told me about Duke Ellington. One day Tony sees Duke, and they were great friends. They were great friends. And so one day he sees Duke, and Duke's in this beautiful, very fancy satin jacket and everything. And he'd just come back from the record company. He said, you dressed so beautifully. You just come back from the record company. He goes, yeah, baby, I had to go to the record company. He said, what do they say? They said, Mr. Ellington, you're not selling records anymore. And he said, hang on a second. I make the records. You're supposed to be selling them. And that nothing's changed, man. It's the same stuff,
Wow.
Now it's crazy. Now we stream everything. People hear music for nothing, and music get paid for nothing. And it's very difficult. But I love the fact that there is a way. There is a way forward.
Yeah.
There's always a way.
You can't do what we used to do.
No.
All the end caps and everything you needed to sell CDs or records or albums, they don't exist anymore.
No, it doesn't. No. But so we got to change our mentality.
You have to get on certain playlists, right? Yeah.
It's a
It's
game.
a whole different game. Yeah.
It's a different game.
Look,
And there are people who are brilliant at that game. And my position as a manager, and yours, I'm sure, would be too, is to find the people who know about that stuff and employ them.
I'm not that. I don't know. I find myself hard to catch up. I mean, all I'm doing really is more live gigs because that's the only place we're making any money.
Right.
Yeah. You can't rely on any CD sales or anything.
No.
No.
One
It's
of
very
you guys do
difficult.
me a
And
favor.
it's also very difficult to break a new act. I find anyway.
Yeah.
New artists.
You
very
guys are giving me like questions like, wow, I'm like bursting at the seams because first of all, let's just take the last thing that you said, Ron. Why is it in this environment so hard to break a new act? What,
Well, you don't. I mean, where do you start with that answering that question? Usually, the old days, the guy would go out and he'd play at the Troubadour or play here and there, and he'd start to build an audience and a fan base, and they'd go and buy the record. Now, it's sort of like there's no avenue. Yeah, radio doesn't make any difference to a live gig. I don't know what you think, Vance, but it doesn't seem to make any difference at all. If you
and especially if it's not iHeartRadio. I mean, iHeartRadio owns everything, and if you're not in their format,
exactly, yeah. So that step from being an artist who likes to perform to getting gigs is like it's a chasm. I find. I mean, you can do the standard thing. Like I have Kyle Eastwood, and we play the Blue Note, and we play Catalina's and all these clubs and everything. But it's very, very difficult to break a new act,
Yeah. What was your secret? I'm sorry. What was your secret then? When so Chick Corea was relatively, famous. When you met him in England, he was already a big name and whatnot. But how did you expand him when you came?
He was well known. He was well known as a player, but he wasn't famous.
I see.
I mean. Yeah, he could play Ronnie Scott's because he's such a brilliant player. Mm-hmm. But to get him from that to selling out the Beacon 3 nights in a row is a long road, But the band was so brilliant.
Mm-hmm. Brilliant.
It's like that, you worked with Paco and Al Di Meola and John McLaughlin.
Yeah.
That band was totally musically brilliant, correct, band? It's amazing.
Yeah.
You couldn't help but book that band. Right. Yeah. And they sold records.
And when they were first together, because the first trio was John, Paco, and Larry Coryell.
Oh, right. Larry was.
For some reason, I'm never quite sure why, but Larry didn't rejoin when they put it together, and they brought Al in, and this was Barry Marshall's concept.
Yeah.
And they brought Al in, and they were the 3 guitar players at the top of their field. John, the monster jazzer, Paco, the flamenco god, and Al, a very clever young jazz player. I mean, very, very high caliber.
Right.
Very different, though. John had this spiritual thing, it was a gift, almost like a gift from God. And Paco was the same, too. It was something that was inherent in them. Mm-hmm. And I'll say this live, Al, a brilliant guitar player, but he didn't quite have that same quality. And that's probably what made it more exciting and more interesting.
It is, yeah.
It brought another whole different element in. And when the 3 of them were going at it together, it was amazing. The thing about that was we would spend all day together.
Right.
We'd have breakfast. We'd get in the car. We'd drive for 2, 3, 4 hours to the next gig. They'd go and have lunch. They'd come and do sound check. By the time they hit the stage, you knew all the shit that had gone down during the day, who had beat this person at cards and who had said this to that person. And you knew they were going to get each other back on stage. And then they were insane, electric, fire.
Jerry, I just had a thought about a question for myself. I wonder how much it's to do with the artists and the musicians these days, because the music has changed so radically. The rap concept and everything. There's very little music in a rap song. Sure. I mean, there is, but there isn't, and there is, and there's Taylor Swift and Beyonce, and there's some big acts.
Yeah.
But I wonder how much it's to do with the quality of the musician. Because what I'm talking about and what Vance was just talking about, those 3 guys together were magic.
Yeah.
The 4 guys when Return to Forever were magic. Weather Report, amazing bands, amazing music. Tony Bennett. How amazing can you be but Tony Bennett?
Sure.
So how good were these bands? Duke Ellington, what a composer he was. I wonder how much it's to do with that, why we're having difficulty breaking new acts. In other words, you got the smooth jazz guys, how many more saxophone players can you listen to? Dave Carrs and all those guys.
True.
But who's doing something different? Who's doing something new? It's interesting. I wonder
I'll
if that's
tell you
part of
who's
the
doing
drama.
something very exciting, and that's Snarky Puppy.
Yes, no, I was.
They're
gonna say
very good.
Snarky Puppy,
Yeah. I like Snarky Puppy.
If I was
yeah.
still mixing sound, that's the band I would like to mix.
right.
Yeah, that's a
Right.
good point.
Yeah.
But how many Snarky Puppies are there?
Oh, there isn't a Snarky
No,
Puppy.
exactly. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
That's right.
I did go to the Clearwater Jazz Festival a couple of weeks ago, and Chick Corea, the guitarist, was with Eric Marienthal, Lau Tizer, Karen Briggs. She's amazing.
Mhm.
Wow.
Joe Rosenblatt on drums. That was a great band.
Yeah.
But I mean, that was an all-star special effects band, they called
Right.
it. But it was the rest of it was like the rest of the festival for me was totally boring.
Yeah.
I didn't hear anything musically, but Snarky Puppy were on Sunday. Unfortunately, I couldn't get tickets, but that was a great show, I heard. Yeah.
Well, the thing about us, Ron, is that, we've been blessed to work with really the highest,
The best musicians in the world.
I'm snobby here, but the highest musicianship there is.
Absolutely.
So to work with anything less than that is for us, it's
Difficult.
very difficult.
Yeah, it's very difficult. Yeah. It's true.
That thing that just blows your mind, that thing when you hear Oscar Peterson playing,
Yeah.
paralyzed with one hand, just able to play with one hand to blow your mind.
Yeah. Every night I would get to listen to Return to Forever. Every
That's true.
night.
My
Yeah.
God.
It's like
Jeez.
day after day after day. It was just absolutely brilliant.
Yeah. So
I mean, they wouldn't have had to pay me. I'd have still been there.
Well,
No, seriously.
Let me ask this question then to Vance. And how is it then that you broke the Well Pennies? I mean, what were you looking for? Were you looking for a new act, or did they find
The
you?
Well Pennies? Well, the Well Pennies, Ron, I'll tell you, are a young folk pop duo,
Oh,
husband and wife duo that I manage.
okay.
And I've known Brian, the husband, since he was 4, because he's the son of a good friend of mine.
Mhm.
The thing was that I worked for Tony for 20 years, but I got sick. I got a deadly blood disease
Ooh.
and almost, croaked, and had to have a stem cell transplant and all of that. And so it took me 2 years to learn to walk again and everything after that. So I lost my gig with Tony because of the illness. They looked after me for a year and a half. I'm very thankful for that. And but I couldn't get well enough quick enough, and they had to move on. So I got sick in 2000. I got the operation in 2011. 2013, they called me to tell me, "Sorry, man, we got to move on."
Yeah.
Same week they called me, Brian called me and said, listen, because he had met this girl and they got married and one thing and another. And I would meet them as we went around. They would send me demos and stuff. So now Brian called me and said, listen, Sarah and I want to take it to the next level. We're looking for management. Can you vet these 2 management companies? And I said, you know what? I'd like to manage you myself. And I never managed anybody. I mean, I tour managed everybody, but I never managed anybody.
Right.
And so, but what I saw in Brian and Sarah is this. I mean, they're so creative on every level, so full of life, not jaded or so desirous to let their gift and their talent come to the fore. And I didn't want them. I said, you know what? I've had a lot of experience. Maybe I can steer them around some of the pitfalls.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why I took them on. What else was I going to do? I couldn't tour anymore. I didn't have the stamina anymore to tour like I used to, 20 hours a day, 7 days a week for 20 years. I can't do that anymore.
No, right.
And so that's why I took them on, because of
So that was 2013.
that was 2013.
Yeah.
So
So how did you break them? How did you?
I haven't broken them. I'm still breaking them.
But they're doing well, right?
They are doing well. It's just it's been just solid work. Just they met in Massachusetts, where Brian's from, at an open mic night. Fell in love, ran away to LA, spent 7 years in LA doing this and that, one thing and another, and we had no money. They asked me to manage them, and they said, "Well, what can we do?" We did the stupid little LA dates that you do, and I say that because it's very cliquey, in LA. If you this kind of music, you go here. That kind of music, you go there.
Exactly. I lived there for 30 years.
Yeah, exactly. So we played all those little folky, poppy venues. They were like, "What can we do? What can we do?" And I said, "Well, what you can do that costs us no money is write. Just write. And they embarked on writing. And then after a while, they decided to move back to Des Moines, Iowa, where Sarah is from, because it was just so expensive in LA, and they were getting nowhere. They were living in a little apartment in some area, and it just, it was enough.
Yeah.
They moved back to Des Moines. They bought a house. Brian completely refurbished it because he's that kind of guy. He built this studio in the basement we call Golden Bear Studio, which is a phenomenal little studio. And we just started, building. It was a vehicle for us. And we started licensing our music, little by little. And the studio started working, and Brian started getting his chops together as a producer and an engineer. And now here we are, whatever the year it is, 2021. And the studio has become a really very solid place for musicians in the Midwest. Brian did 7 albums of 7 other artists this year.
Wow.
And, we've got 3 or 4 different Well Penny projects on, and everything is really growing and building. No money. We're broke as anything, but we're established.
Well, that's interesting. That's interesting because I worked with Kyle Eastwood. We started working together in 2001, and we did a deal where he used to pay. I was working with a guy called Steve Chapman at the time, and he paid us I think it was $2,000 a month. He had the money, paid us $2,000 a month to manage him until we could get the income above the commission, if you follow me. Right. Okay. And, really, when I look at it, all we've done with him, really, since 2001 is we've just done gig after gig after gig.
Right.
Now, in France, he can pull fees of I shouldn't say, but they're very substantial fees.
Right.
Good money. And it took 20 years. And now all we did was just keep playing. We made records. He did a couple of movies for his dad, which helps a lot because of the exposure of him as an artist.
Right.
And now we've built a base in France, which is amazing. We're just going to do 23 dates in France now. But I think the only thing we did is what you said. You just kept, we didn't do anything. You had no hits. There were no special song or anything. Maybe Gran Torino, which Jamie Cullum sang on the movie Gran Torino with Clint. Yeah. That helped a little. But, it's not a hit. You know what I mean?
Right.
But 20 years later, he's got a career. And really, all we did was what you did with the guys. You just kept doing it, right? Kept writing, kept playing.
Here we are 8 years later.
Yeah.
But what we've built is a solid foundation.
Exactly.
We've got a studio which is phenomenal. We've got a studio that all these musicians from all over love to come and work at, And we've got our record label, which is called Golden Bear Records, which is really a vehicle for the Well Pennies just to put stuff out.
Sure, yeah.
And
you're selling me physical CDs. Do you sell physical CDs?
Yeah, we do. Yeah.
Yeah. Not a lot, though, right?
No, not a lot. But our audience is kind of like 30 to 80-year-olds.
Yeah.
Because they're very appealing to the whole. They're like.
I gotta listen,
if you like.
So you play folk clubs and stuff. Where do you play?
We've been doing a lot of house concerts.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
I heard about that. Yeah,
fantastic. You go out, you play to 40 people in somebody's house. Mm-hmm. You sell some merch. You can come away with $1,500, $2,000. And it's very intimate. Everybody's very close, and you take an intermission, you drink some wine, you talk.
That's brilliant. That's absolutely brilliant. Yeah.
But but we opened for Diana Krall at 7 of the sheds on the West Coast a few years.
Right. Yeah.
So they are unknown
caller.
Oh, they have they have Brian especially has the thing when he hits stage, man, within 15 seconds, he has the audience in his hands. It's just the way he is. It's just
Good,
a thing,
yeah.
you know. And so, yeah, we can play anything, but we've been concentrating mostly, especially the pandemic and everything. We've been concentrating mostly on the studio and recording and licensing the music. You know.
How did you get the opening to Diane Krall? That's a pretty good one.
Well, I know Diana, and
you do? Okay.
Yeah, because she opened for Tony.
Right, that's the connection.
We kept, you know, we kept in good friends and everything. And then I was talking to her daily guy, Daryl, and he called me. He said, "I need an act. I need an opening act for this shed somewhere. I can't even remember where it was. Somewhere in the Midwest.
Yeah,
one night. Can you do it?" Because I've been sending him the CDs and telling him what we were doing. I said, "Yeah, we'll do it." So we went out and did it.
Mm-hmm.
And he loved us so much that they gave us 6 more.
Oh, wow.
Because, you know, you got to have the intermission to sell beer in the ship. So you want an opening act.
Right.
So to play when the sky is still bright.
Right.
And then you want the opening act to finish and go away, and then the people to sell the beer, and then the main act comes on as it gets dark and the lights can go. So that was fine with us, you know. But she liked us, and we thoroughly enjoyed doing it, you know.
That's brilliant.
Yeah.
That's pretty brilliant. But you'd notice you said earlier that he's a really good communicator, Brian, right? He captures the audience.
Yeah, right away.
There's the quality that gets them across. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
What is the quality that for any young musician that makes them attractive to a manager? What are managers looking for? What should they have? I mean, there is the it factor, but are there other things that they need to have together before they could be considered attractive to a manager?
Good question. I'm not sure I'm looking, but I'm old now. You know, I'm sort of winding down a little bit. I'm 77 years old. I'm not looking for new acts.
Sure.
I don't know.
But I mean, just a manager in general. I mean, you guys have been in the business so much. So if there's an artist that's just starting out and they say, well, I need a manager, what should they have in place or together before they should even consider that being the next step for them?
I always think they need to earn the right to have a manager. They have to develop themselves and the act to a point where they deserve a manager. They earn it. They have to earn it. It's like, you know, Chick put in years and years of work before he got a manager. Years. He'd played with Miles. He was a monster player. He knew he could play anything before he got a manager. And then he found a friend. I did a blog once. I wish I hadn't deleted it. It's called Grow Your Own Manager. Find somebody you trust. You know, like that's what happened to me, really. I became Chick's friend and he trusted me and we went ahead and I learned how to do it. I mean, being a tour manager and being a manager, totally different functions.
Totally different.
They're totally different, yeah. Being a tour manager you can pretty well do it with anybody, right?
Yeah.
But managing an act and seeing where they want to go and understanding what they're doing is a whole other game.
Whole other thing.
Well, can you share some of the technical differences between the two in case there's an artist out there who's wondering, what are those differences?
I don't know. But for instance, one success I had was that Chick wanted to do classical music. And he was learning Mozart D minor piano concerto day after day, 5 hours a day. And we had no outlet for it. It wasn't financially feasible to go out with an orchestra. You couldn't do that. You had to play. So I met up with a guy, Peter Gelb, Sony Music. He broke the Titanic record. You know, everybody else passed on the soundtrack to Titanic. Not soundtrack. What do you call it? Everybody passed on the music except him. And it became a monstrous hit with Celine Dion and everybody, you know. And I met up with him and we came up with this idea for Chick. And it took us 2 or 3 years to put it together, which is not what you do when you're a tour manager. It took 3 years, but in the end, we ended up at Air Studios in London and recording with the London Symphony. And Chick made this fabulous record. And away we went. You know what I mean? And then we did concerts around the world, and Chick started playing with orchestras. It took 3 or 4 years to put that together. Whereas a tour manager gets like 6 weeks to put the whole tour together. You know, you have to, and you deal. I feel sometimes these days I feel like a bloody travel agent. All I'm doing is booking flights and airfares and trains and things. You know. Yeah, but you've got to keep the vision going, haven't you? You got to keep the vision going.
Exactly. A tour manager is really a like a general.
Yes.
You just got to keep it all together and make it groove.
Right.
You know, but the booker, whoever's booking it, books it. The management, does all dealing with the agency and one thing another, and the tour manager is handed handed the date and put it together, do all the production, do all the advancing, do all the travel, do all the instrumentation, make sure everybody's groovy, make sure everybody gets paid, blah, blah, blah. It's just really a formula. You're just following a formula.
You follow it. I'm working on something now, like a new project with Kyle. We're doing with the French agent, who's very, very good guy, Fred Glusman. And we put together this idea. We're writing scores to all of a lot of Clint's movies, Good, Badly, Ugly, and all those movies.
Yeah.
And we're going to put Kyle's band with the orchestra, starting in Lyon and Paris next October. We're going to try and bring Clint over to be there, and hopefully we'll get a new career for Kyle, which is playing with orchestras. But we've been at it 2 years already. Now we got to the point where we found a great guy to write the scores and everything. But it takes a long time to put together. Right? Yeah. But meantime, I had to do 23 dates between now and December 14th and organize all the travel and everything else. So there you go. It's a different way of thinking.
So then the manager isn't touring with the act. It's only the tour manager, and the manager is back at the office handling.
Well, you can't afford to tour. That's the problem. If you had, like, we've got a 5-piece quintet with Kyle. You had one guy, that's 1/6 more the cost.
Gotcha.
You can't just add somebody to it.
Yeah.
They don't have a tour manager. We don't have a sound engineer like the old days.
That's why people like me, and there's a few of us out there who did everything. We were production managers, tour managers, and we were sound engineers. We were
did it all. Yeah, exactly. I could never mix. I never learned to mix. We had Bernie Kirsch, but I mean, basically, I did everything else.
Right. Yeah.
But would Bernie travel with you, or he would just
Bernie traveled
in the studio?
Us,
Is that right?
Yeah, the sound. Yeah, Bernie was also a studio engineer, but he was brilliant.
Yeah.
He was just absolutely a good sound engineer. I would prefer a sound engineer over a tour manager.
Yeah.
A good one.
Yeah, a bad sound engineer can really screw everything up. Yeah.
Yeah, it ruins the whole show, doesn't it?
Yeah. It does.
Bernie Kirsch was extraordinary. I remember the Hollywood Bowl. We did the show at the Hollywood Bowl, and he could get a mix up in about 30 seconds. From the start of the show, 30 seconds later, you'd have a workable mix. It's not perfect, but it worked.
Yeah.
Which I couldn't believe how he did that. It was extraordinary.
He's got ears.
Great ears. And then they, take, another 5 minutes, they got it in better and they're fine. But to get a mix up in the Hollywood Bowl in 30 seconds is pretty amazing,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, let me ask these questions, and then we'll wrap it up, gentlemen. I appreciate your time, but tell me this: what, beginning with Ron, what is, you would say, your best experience that just snaps out as either a manager or what you're doing now as a touring manager? Is there one climactic moment that you go, I mean, oh my God, you did listen to Return to Forever for weeks and weeks at a time, up close and personal, but was there something that just like popped out the tent for you?
I don't know what to tell you. That's a long.
Too many of them.
Yeah, too many of them. It's true.
Give me one. Give us one.
I met presidents. It was fun. I never thought I'd do that. Stevie Wonder, watching Stevie Wonder and Chick play together in his garage. That was a moment.
Oh my God.
And Stevie knew all of Chick's songs.
Is that right?
He knew them all. Celebration Suite. He just played them over. he's an extraordinary musician, Steve.
He's an extraordinary musician. Yeah, he knows so much stuff. Yeah.
But I love Tony Bennett too. I think the Tony Bennett Gaga thing is amazing, you know.
He's amazing.
Do you? Yeah. So that's a moment, but there's too many moments in the Vance.
Yeah.
Life. I mean, I could write a book.
Yeah.
You should write a book. Write a book. We talked about that before, right? Should.
Well, the only problem I have with that is that, you know, one of the factors of a manager is confidence and confidentiality. You don't discuss the actor or what they did or their private lives. And the trouble is we know too much, don't we, Vance?
Yeah, we do.
Honestly, we know too much.
Wow. You know, as a tour manager, especially with Tony Bennett, you know, I cared for this person. I was with this person, you know, 18 hours or 20 hours a day for 20 years. I was his confidant. Right. I was his production manager. I was his, you know, all of that. And so when you see things like Princess Diana's, you know, personal guide telling stories about how she was and stuff like that, that really makes me very angry.
Yeah, but you can't
say you have confidence in the person. You don't tell people about them.
No, that it's almost like violates the role of a manager.
Violation, yeah.
Because
I'll tell you one really exciting moment. It was when we recorded Friday night in San Francisco at the Warfield Theater in San Francisco with the guitar trio. It was my first American tour. I'd been 2.5 months in Europe with the trio, and we'd torn the place up. East Berlin, East Germany, you know, West, everywhere. And we hit America. My first gig was Carnegie Hall. My second gig was the Hollywood Bowl.
Oh.
My third gig was the Santa Monica Civic. And then somewhere, like a couple of weeks later, we did the Warfield Theater and we recorded it. The band were hot. They were insanely hot.
Yes.
And I was at the mixing board, which is on the mezzanine level at the Warfield. I was at the mixing board and I was on, baby. I was on. John had taught me to anticipate the improvising musician. So however they were, I was ahead of them.
Yeah.
Bam, you know? Mm-hmm. And on my left was Bill Graham at the mixing board. And on my right was Carlos Santana at the mixing board.
Oh my goodness.
And I'm at the mixing board and my mind is blown. You know, this is like the most heavenly experience. That was a moment.
Yeah.
That's a moment.
I like Bill Graham.
Of it.
I love Bill Graham. I mean, a lot of people didn't like him, but
I loved him.
He was a great guy, wasn't he?
Loved him, yeah. And he was Barry Marshall's hero. Barry loved Bill.
Yeah. I bet.
Bill was the greatest.
Yeah. But Santana one side and Bill Graham the other. That's
at the board, you know, they're at the board with me. Unbelievable.
Yeah, it's a great story.
Many moments, so many great, incredible moments.
Yeah, many. That's the problem. Too many. Yeah. And you can't, you know, you the artist trusts you. You can't go around writing expose books. I mean, that's terrible. That's corny.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, maybe, I don't know, maybe the book would be, you know, limited in what your memoirs are and more in your expertise. And
he's a very good editor because when you're writing a book, you flow.
Yeah.
You know, I've written a bunch of stuff and everything. I got notes everywhere. The title of my book will be The Observations of an Idiot. And but when you tell the story, you flow. You know, you flow.
Yeah.
So it's hard.
So the editor comes in and rips it apart, basically.
Well, you got to find an editor you trust who knows. Okay. You know. But that's like anything that we do, everything that we do. It's always best to find people who are empathetic and sympathetic and simpatico, whatever word you want to use, who have the groove, who can be a part of it.
Yeah.
Because you're looking for team members. You're looking for people to give of themselves, of the same that you give of yourself.
Yeah.
And this is something. So an editor would be that kind of character as well, and they would, you know, they get the vibe.
Well, that's one of the skills of a good tour manager, isn't it? Or a good manager for them, right? Is putting a team together.
Yeah.
I mean, That's what you got to do. You got to the accountant, the business manager, all these guys, the road crew. Who do you use? I mean, it's very critical. You got a bad road crew guy, can ruin the tour.
Absolutely, just poison the whole thing.
Absolutely.
I had to get rid of a few of them myself.
Yeah, I've fired a few people too. Yeah.
But the thing about it is, a tour manager's gig, apart from the logistics, which is extremely boring, all the flights and the hotels and everything, is finding the groove.
Yes.
When you're on a tour, the first Pat Metheny tour I did was a 6-week tour of Europe that got extended by 2 weeks, that got extended by 2 weeks, that got extended by 2 weeks. It was a 12-week tour.
Oh, my goodness.
And we were insane at the end of it. Lyle came back to America and checked himself into a rehab right away. I mean, it was nuts. But trying to keep everybody, because the thing about a tour is it can be a week.
Mm-hmm.
I always say, okay, let's take a 6-week tour. The first week, you're exhausted. You're dragging your ass. You don't even know your timing's all gone. Then you get into gig mode. And now you groove through the next 4 weeks and everything. And then the last week is the worst week. Dragging your ass again.
You're so right.
Imagine that then being extended by 2 weeks. And again, people were nuts. And so find the groove, man. That's the thing.
Pat seems a pretty straight ahead guy. I mean, he knows what he wants and that, right?
Absolutely. Closest hotel to the gig. Doesn't matter if it's the Days Inn or the Ritz-Carlton. It's the closest hotel.
About that. Yeah.
11 days on, 1 travel day off. I mean, he worked. Yeah.
I don't like the minutia that you have to deal with. That's my thing. But Pat seems so pretty like Lyle was a nice guy, right?
Wonderful.
Yeah, he was a good player too. Anyway,
unbelievable. And he looked so spindly and thin, but he was the most competitive person, the most vicious basketball player you've ever seen in your life.
Really?
God, forget about it. He'd kill you. He would play 3 computer chess games at the same time.
You're kidding?
No. So, I mean, a very unusual, incredible guy, brilliant.
Genius,
Yeah, genius. We lost him.
Wow, you work with some great guys, Vance. I mean,
yeah, I know.
I had a long stretch with one artist. You've met many. Yeah,
I have. I've been very blessed.
And you've got an English sense of humor.
Well, you got to, haven't you?
We haven't given Jerry a hard time, have we? No. We should.
No, I've done my best to try to stay out of it. You know what I mean? But the way you were talking, it was just like, well, here's a question. It was almost like double Dutch, trying to jump in and ask it.
Well, it's good. It's really good to know you, Ron. And
nice to meet you too, man.
Hopefully,
I wish we'd known each other earlier.
Yeah, yeah. At least by 5 o'clock would have been all right. But hopefully we can chat sometime.
Where are you living? Where do you live?
I live in Miami.
Oh, crikey, just down the road.
Down the road, yeah.
I'm in Tampa. Yeah, we just had a storm today that was amazing. Did it hit you guys?
No, it's supposed to come through here around 2 o'clock in the morning, but
bloody hell! It was a violent storm.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. Tornado watch, everything.
Right, I saw that.
Yeah.
Wow.
But we're alive.
Thank God for that.
I hope that you've enjoyed yourself. I've enjoyed myself immensely.
We're just getting going here.
Yeah, we just started. What's the next hour going to be? Who do you support? Who's your team in England?
Well,
I'm Man U, really. I'm sorry to say.
Yeah, well, that's okay.
Okay. Nobody knows what I'm talking about, do they?
No, Man U, you have to be Man U. Since the disaster, it was always Man U.
Yeah, but last week we got killed. I mean, Liverpool killed us.
And of course, I have Liverpudlian friends and I love Liverpool. And so, what can I tell you?
Oh, you're Brighton and Hove Albion, right?
Well, no. I was always a Tottenham Hotspur guy.
Oh, you like Spurs? I love Michael Caine, Sam. They're great players.
Yeah, they are great. But I'm married to a Brazilian, so,
Yeah, what do you do about that? Who's she support?
I cheer for Brazil, man. I put a Brazilian shirt on. I cheer for Brazil.
Do you really? That's
my
funny.
word.
Sorry about that. That was about soccer, by the way. You call it soccer, Jerry.
Yeah, I call it soccer. Yeah.
Soccer, yeah. And it's become very popular in America now, thank God.
Yeah, really?
Yeah. It took a while.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Well,
Jerry, you're going to shut us down, right?
I don't know what to do.
I mean, you guys are still throwing the football and calling it football.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, right.
Very
How
weird.
can you say it's football when you throw it? I mean,
I've lived here for 35 years. I don't get it. I just don't get it.
Well, this is the Entree Musician. That's Ron Moss. That's Vance Anderson. Two of my heroes, for sure.
Maybe part of our success, Vance, is we have a sense of humor, because you're going to have one when you're out there, haven't you?
That's true.
Yeah, you got to laugh.
Got to find the groove.
That is true. Well, you can look at Vance up. You can Google both of these guys, and you can get into some of the hallmarks. I guess the book is now Observations of an Idiot, should be coming out hopefully shortly. And then we're waiting for Ron to find an editor. But great guys, great memories, and this is really the soundtrack of our lives. When you think about Pat Metheny or Lau Mays, when you think about Tony Bennett, when you think about Chick Corea or Stanley Clarke or Airto, or Carlos Santana standing to the left of Vance. I mean, this is life. As we know it.
Can I jump in here for a moment?
Sure. I'll never end the broadcast, but go for it.
I wanted to say before, when you said, what is a manager looking for in an artist?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, you never answered. Go ahead.
No, because first and foremost, you want somebody who's ultra talented, who's got a gift. That's the first thing. The second thing is I would always look for commitment. Tony Bennett knew what it took to be a great artist. And he was very gifted, and he had the gift and the voice and all of that, but he knew what it took to do all the interviews, to turn up at everything, to sing at 6 o'clock in the morning all of that. And that's what it takes. If someone wants to be successful in this business, you've got to work your ass off. There's no way around it.
No shortcut.
No shortcut. And like Ron said, it takes years, to make something come together. It's taken me 8 years to get the Well Pennies where they are now. Not me, but us, to get ourselves where we are now. It takes 20 years to get something else together, but it takes time. It takes effort. And if you're willing to put the time and effort and you have the gift, then I'm looking for you.
There's no such thing as an overnight success, that's for sure.
No.
You're right about that. No, it's none whatsoever.
Yeah.
So any final words, Ron?
Goodbye.
Bye-bye, yeah.
Goodbye.
I trust you appreciated this wonderful conversation and that you have personally gained some keen insight. If you happen to be a musician who's looking for a manager, or conversely, if you're a manager just starting out and you're looking for your first artist to take on as clients, please know through the Entree Musician, you can reach out to both of these men. All you have to do is email us at theentremusician@gmail.com. That's our general email address, and we'll make sure that both Ron and Vance gets back to you as soon as their schedule allows. Again, this was an encore presentation of the Entree Musician. Go back, as I said before, and watch the original individual interviews with each one of them to gain more insight on their extraordinary lives and career. And as always, we ask you to come on and join us at the Entree Musician yourself. Go to the website. We want you to like and subscribe to this channel, share this channel with others who will benefit from the incredible conversations that we continue to have here. It's always a pleasure to join you. My name is Jerry B. I am the Entree Musician, and so are you. We will see you again next time. God bless.